Okay, let's just dive right in. Picture this. A perfectly ordinary street in London.
Yeah, terraced houses, looks like any other street.
But step inside just one of them, number 10 Rillington Place, and you'd find something truly monstrous hidden away.
It's chilling. For years, a killer operated right there.
And not just killing, he was actively weaving this web of lies, manipulation.
Absolutely. And it had consequences far beyond his direct victims, tragically pulling in an innocent man.
So we've pulled together a stack of material for this deep dive. Articles, historical accounts, some psychological analyses.
Yeah, lots to unpack here.
And our mission is really to guide you through the most important insights from all of it. We want to understand how someone like John Christie could maintain such a chillingly deceptive facade.
In his manipulation, the
it's-
terrifying mechanics of.
Right, the horrifying details of the crimes themselves, how he managed to evade detection for so long.
And the impact, the absolute profound and lasting ripple effect his case had on the entire British justice system.
It's definitely a dark story, no doubt, but one that holds some crucial lessons, I think.
And what immediately jumps out from this material is that contrast you mentioned right at the start. John Reginald Halliday Christie, living at 10 Rillington Place in Notting Hill.
Yeah.
Outwardly, according to these accounts, he was just, well, the definition of unassuming, quiet, mild-mannered.
Easily overlooked, the kind of person you'd nod to on the street and never think twice about.
Exactly. And that ordinary appearance was really reinforced by his background, wasn't it?
It was. A former post office clerk sounds harmless enough. But significantly, he also served as a special police constable during World War II.
Ah, yes. That role during the war is key. It gave him this instant veneer of respectability, didn't it?
Authority, trustworthiness, qualities he absolutely did not possess, but used, well, masterfully.
And the stark difference between his calm, almost bland exterior and the unspeakable reality hidden within that house.
That's where this idea of the mask of sanity really hits home, looking at this material.
It really does. It's that ability to appear completely normal while harboring, truly severe psychological deviance.
And the horrors beneath that mask, they unfolded over a decade.
Right, from the mid-1940s up to the early 50s, specifically 1943 to 1953.
He was convicted of 6 murders, but the general feeling from the sources points to him having killed at least 8 women.
Yes, the victims named in the material. Let's see. Ruth First in 1943, she was a munitions worker.
Okay.
Muriel Eady in 1944, who was actually a colleague of his.
Right, worked with him.
Then in 1949, the incredibly tragic case of his upstairs tenants, Beryl Evans, and her baby daughter, Geraldine.
We'll definitely come back to that. It's crucial.
Absolutely. Later, in December 1952, his own wife, Ethel Christie.
His wife. Unbelievable.
And finally, in early 1953, Rita Nelson, Kathleen Maloney, and Hectorina McLennan, often described as marginalized women, maybe one looking for work.
And his method for luring these women, it's particularly disturbing. It wasn't brute force at first, but this kind of perverse trickery.
It was. He'd pose as someone with medical knowledge, which was a total fabrication, of course.
Right.
And offer to help women with minor things like a headache or a cough, using this rigged device. He'd claim it delivered a special inhalant.
But it wasn't. It was just domestic coal gas.
Exactly. Delivered to render them unconscious or semi-conscious.
And then he would strangle them, often using something like a tie or a cord, a ligature.
Yes. But what the sources really drive home is that the gassing and strangling, they weren't the end goal themselves.
No, they were preparatory, weren't they?
Precisely. Necrophilia was a profound and central aspect of his crimes. The material indicates his primary sexual drive was linked to, well, to having sex with the bodies of his victims after they were dead or incapacitated.
And this is often contrasted with reports of him struggling with impotence, with conscious partners.
Right, suggesting his sexual arousal was fundamentally tied to his absolute control over someone helpless or, deceased.
And he kept them there, right under everyone's noses, in the house. The concealment methods are just horrifying.
Absolutely chilling. Bodies were found buried in that tiny back garden.
You talk a little patch of earth.
Hidden under the floorboards of the house itself.
In the rooms they lived in.
And most incredibly, sealed off behind wallpaper in a kitchen alcove, sometimes called the wash house.
Living for years like that, with human remains hidden away, maybe meters from where you slept and ate.
It's a stark illustration of his total lack of human feeling, isn't it? Just complete detachment.
Okay, but the horror didn't just stop with his direct victims.
Yeah.
This is where his manipulation takes an even more devastating turn, pulling in his upstairs neighbors, Timothy and Beryl Evans.
Ah, yes, the Evans family. They moved into the flat above Christie in 1948 with their baby, Geraldine.
And the material describes Timothy Evans as having a low IQ and being quite easily led.
Which made him tragically susceptible to a manipulator like Christie. Very vulnerable.
So in late 1949, Beryl and Geraldine vanished. And Evans, he gave a series of conflicting stories at first.
He did, including one where he actually claimed Beryl died during an attempted abortion performed by Christie.
Pointing the finger early on, in a way.
But this is where the manipulation really intensifies. Possibly under pressure from police, and certainly influenced by Christie, who's still playing the respectable neighbor.
Right.
Evans confessed to killing his wife.
But then he retracted that confession.
He did. He directly accused Christie, telling the police the real killer was living downstairs.
But at Evans's trial,
Mm-hmm.
and they tried him for Geraldine's murder first, didn't they? Seemingly believing it was the stronger case.
That's right. And Christie was presented as a key witness for the prosecution.
Unbelievable. Playing the part.
Completely. Denied any involvement, played the shocked, reliable neighbor, and successfully pointed the finger squarely back at Evans.
And devastatingly, despite his retraction, despite accusing Christie, Timothy Evans was found guilty.
Guilty of murdering his daughter. He was hanged in March 1950.
And the belief at the time was just, Evans did it. Killed them both.
That was the prevailing narrative, yes.
But the truth, the gut-wrenching truth, now universally accepted from the material we've looked at, is that John Christie murdered both Beryl and Geraldine Evans.
Yes. An innocent man was executed directly as a result of Christie's cold-blooded deceit.
It's just sickening.
The terrible truth finally began to unravel, but not until March 1953, after Christie had actually moved out of Rillington Place.
Right. A new tenant moved in.
Exactly.
No.
A man named Beresford Brown. He was doing some DIY, putting up a shelf in the kitchen.
So that he finds
Something utterly horrific.
Mhm.
3 bodies hidden in that papered-over alcove.
Rita Nelson, Kathleen Maloney, and Hectorina McLennan,
Yes. That gruesome discovery finally prompted a full search of the property.
which uncovered even more horrors.
It did. The search found the body of Christie's wife, Ethel, hidden under the floorboards in the living room.
Under his own living room floor.
Then the remains of Ruth First and Muriel Eady were found buried in that small garden.
So that's 6 bodies found at 10 Rillington Place then, not counting Beryl and Geraldine Evans, who'd been removed years before.
Correct.
Christie, knowing the game was up, he went on the run.
For a brief time, yes. But he was recognized and arrested on March 31st, 1953, near Putney Bridge. A police officer spotted him.
And during police questioning, well, the dam finally broke, didn't it? He started confessing.
He did. He admitted to killing Ethel, First, Edie, and the 3 women found in the alcove.
Then significantly.
Significantly, he also confessed to murdering Beryl Evans. However, he continued to maintain his denial regarding Geraldine Evans's murder.
Even though all the signs pointed to him being the killer of both mother and daughter, selective confession.
Very selective. His trial was in June 1953. His defense tried to argue he was insane, pointing to, medical history, head injuries, psychological issues.
But didn't it work?
No. He was found sane and guilty. They tried him specifically for Ethel's murder, which was common practice then when a serial killer was caught.
Right. Focus on one clear case.
Exactly. John Christie was executed by hanging on July 15, 1953, at Pentonville Prison, just months after the discovery.
When you look back, the psychology is perhaps the most complex and terrifying part of this whole case. How did someone with that outward appearance conceal such deep depravity?
That deceptive facade, the mask of sanity we talked about, it was absolutely crucial. His appearance is quiet, harmless, even his former police role.
It created a perfect camouflage.
It really did. It made him the last person anyone would suspect, allowing him to operate undetected for so long.
And beneath that facade was this profound sexual deviance centered on necrophilia.
Yes, and it's important to stress this wasn't some secondary element. It seems central to his motivation. The sexual gratification derived from possessing and performing acts on deceased or incapacitated individuals. That was key for him.
Combined with sexual sadism.
Right. The need for power and control, achieved through the whole process, luring, gassing, strangling. It paints a picture of a man whose sexuality was, twisted beyond comprehension and tied directly to dominance and the objectification of his victims.
And the manipulation. It wasn't just about getting victims into the house. It was about survival, wasn't it? Successfully deflecting suspicion onto Timothy Evans is maybe the most chilling example.
It required an astonishing level of cunning, I think, and ruthlessness to lie under oath, knowing the likely outcome for an innocent man.
And to do it so convincingly, fooling the judge, the jury.
It demonstrates a profound capacity for deceit and a complete absence of empathy or remorse. He simply viewed his victims, and even those around him like Evans, as objects to be used or discarded.
And he lived this double life for years with his wife Ethel in the same house where he was committing murders and hiding bodies.
That level of compartmentalization is frankly disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
To maintain a seemingly normal domestic life while simultaneously engaging in serial murder and concealment right under the same roof, it required a severe psychological detachment, an ability to just wall off his secret life completely from his everyday interactions.
So how did he manage to keep this going for so long? It seems impossible that no one suspected anything.
Well, it all connects back to these elements we've been discussing. His incredibly effective deceptive facade was probably the primary reason. People just didn't see him as a threat.
They saw the quiet neighbor, the ex-policeman.
Exactly. His skill in manipulating others, especially deflecting suspicion onto Evans, was a major factor in evading capture for years.
And the victims themselves.
The vulnerability of some of his victims, who might have been transient or had fewer people immediately noticing their disappearance, that also played a role, sadly.
And his initial concealment methods, while eventually discovered, were effective at keeping the crimes contained within his private space for a significant period.
Right. And crucially, the authorities were tragically misled. They focused their investigations squarely on Timothy Evans for years.
While the real killer was literally living downstairs. Unbelievable.
It really is.
The legacy of the Christie Evans case is just massive, isn't it? Particularly for the British justice system.
Oh, it had a truly profound impact. The stark revelation that Christie had almost certainly killed Beryl and Geraldine, and that Timothy Evans had been executed for their deaths, it caused a national uproar.
Understandably.
It fueled immense public unease about the ultimate finality and, the potential fallibility of capital punishment, executing the innocent.
And that outcry led to a sustained campaign to clear Timothy Evans's name, didn't it?
Yes. Figures like the writer Ludovic Kennedy were really instrumental in bringing the evidence of Evans's innocence to light, fighting for him.
And eventually.
This pressure eventually resulted in Timothy Evans receiving a posthumous royal pardon in 1966. And much later, in 2004, his conviction was formally quashed by the Court of Appeal.
So, formally acknowledging the injustice.
Effectively, yes. Though the court technically cited flaws rather than declaring factual innocence, the widespread acceptance is that he was innocent.
And the biggest impact of all, on the death penalty itself.
The Christie Evans case is widely considered one of the most significant factors that contributed to the movement to abolish capital punishment in Great Britain.
Correct.
A very strong one. It served as this devastating example of the irreversible consequences of executing an innocent person. Capital punishment for murder was suspended in 1965 and permanently abolished in 1969.
And the house itself, 10 Rillington Place, eventually demolished.
Yes, in the 1970s. Understandably, given its infamous history. Wiped off the map.
So if we pull all of this together, what are the core insights from this deep dive for you, the listener?
I mean, we see that absolutely chilling contrast, don't we? A totally mundane exterior masking truly profound depravity.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of how effective manipulation can be, blinding not just individuals, but even official systems.
And the devastating human cost when those systemic failures lead to such a catastrophic injustice, like with Timothy Evans.
Understanding this case is, I think, vital because it forces us to look beyond just surface appearances, doesn't it?
Absolutely. To critically question what we're presented with, particularly by those in positions of perceived authority or trustworthiness.
It really highlights the fragility of justice sometimes.
It does. And it makes us grapple with the uncomfortable reality of how someone can live among us, appear utterly normal, while being capable of, unimaginable horrors.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into such a dark chapter.
Yeah, a difficult but important journey to take, I think.
The story of John Christie and 10 Rillington Place leaves us with this really unsettling question, doesn't it? Given his terrifying ability to hide his true nature and manipulate everyone, including the very system designed to catch him, how well can we ever truly know what lies beneath the surface of seeming ordinariness in the world around us?
It's a sobering thought.
This case forces us to look not just at the mind of the killer, but at the vulnerabilities in ourselves and the systems that allowed such horror and injustice to persist for so long. Something to keep thinking about.